Welcome everybody. I wanted to first welcome the folks from out of town. It's truly some global event here. So I saw participants from Malaysia and Iraq and the Philippines and India and Western Europe and North America, South America. So I want to thank you all for joining and appreciate some of you staying up real late. Secondarily, the intent of this is around healthcare. A lot of this stuff does touch other industries, and so appreciate some other folks coming in. We've seen people from the EPA that registered, from retail, from rail, from oil and gas, and other things. We've got some friends in the software business, some OEMs, and some energy engineers that are participating. So appreciate you all joining. I want to say that we have some good questions that I hope to be able to answer, and put them in the Q&A survey as Jessica mentioned. I'll try to answer them all. I hope you ask some hard ones because those are the most fun for me. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started as this pops up here. Welcome from the USA there. So Jessica was introduced herself earlier. My name's Ian. I work at Redaptive. I run our technical solutions group, which is essentially the technical side of sales. If you have questions around equipment, energy conservation measures, installation, safety, how that stuff operates in this business, please ask. I've run engineering, the installation side, safety, the metering design, customer service, and several other groups at Redaptive, and happy to answer questions around that and how that works in this business. Okay, so here's the agenda we're going to do. We're going to just go over some of the goals real quick. I'm going to give a little background of Redaptive and what we do and how the finance world works in the capital equipment side, especially on energy as a service. It's a really important lever for people to be able to pull at healthcare organizations. Talk about challenges. That's where the survey is going to come up. We see some that are pretty frequently used, and we'd love to get your opinions, especially if you're truly on the healthcare side. If you're an operator, that would be the best people to answer those survey questions. And then talk about energy as a service, options for that, the different types of the way we look at it, and then talk about, we're going to go over some economics as we do a lot of finance here. Economics is certainly part of this, and talk about financial treatments, off balance sheet approaches, and also how you can leverage this across multiple sites to make it a benefit. So the goals that we hope to give to talk about today are the discover impact aging infrastructure and how energy as a service can improve this. It's reliability, performance. It also helps with savings in energy costs, and it helps with maintenance savings. So we're going to talk about that. That's the second bullet. We've got a couple of case studies. I've tried to mix those in there. We've got three very unique ones that are different, and so hopefully those resonate with you. And then talk about cost neutrality and how this works, and how you can get there. A lot of people don't understand, but with a lot of the financial instruments that are out there, equipment can be replaced without any cost to the operating company. Okay, so Redaptive operates in sort of a few different functions here. There's energy solutions. This is easy. It's at scale. It can be single site or multi-site. We've done portfolios at 500 sites at a time, or down to a single one. There's a global reach: Western Europe, Canada, Mexico. We've done some in Asia, but really our main focus is North America and Western Europe. And then the expertise. So a lot of the work we do is around LED lighting and controls, HVAC, central plant. This can include deep work down to geothermal installations, and then generation, so solar, battery, and other generation techniques. Data solutions is a really important part of what we do here. So we have created our own meter. We have gas, water, and electric that we use. these are performance-based contracts that we operate and that you see in this world of finance, or you should see, so you can actually see that your equipment is performing as projected. Any of that reporting is very, very much simplified. It can go right to Energy Star, and there's APIs that can take you up into a different reporting mechanism for GRESB and any other thing. It gives you insights, and it also can look into that data, and it can give you suggestions for things to do for new optimization measures. It supports the scope 2 and 3 reporting as well. And then on the financial solutions side, there's quite a bit that we do. One of the main thing that we do is energy as a service. This is off balance sheet, which is really important. The debt sits on Adaptive's books, not on the customer's book. And that's a really important function of the finance that we do, and one of the unique pieces of Adaptive. We do power generation and PPAs. We do equipment finance. So if people are buying equipment, we can finance that. And then asset remarketing. This is essentially at a healthcare organization. If you've got hospital beds that you're renovating, or you're going to change your footprint, and you have a bunch of hospital beds that you want to get rid of, those can be sold through Adaptive as well. So that can be anywhere from equipment, pieces of equipment, to hospital equipment. All of that is within the remarketing services. So we talked a little bit about that, but at the energy as a service, when we're really talking about this is capital free, and increasing operational savings. So essentially, when we do this work, we put up the capital. There's no out-of-pocket expense by the customer. The customer pays Adaptive back for the price of the project with interest over time from the savings. And that savings can be the energy savings. It can also be maintenance savings. So really important that there's no out-of-pocket capital. There are some instances where there are some, let's say, resiliency measures that we'll talk about in a little bit that just don't have the savings to pay that down. And you can finance that too and use the savings to offset a big portion of that. On power generation, we talked about PPAs. We see a lot of people doing PPAs to reduce GHG. We see them doing, stabilization of costs. There's a cost that's locked in for that energy rate. As energy rates are going, upwards and rarely downwards. And the other piece that people are using that for is resiliency on the grid. So with the quantity of assets that are being put onto the grid generally today, the grid is becoming more worrisome for a lot of people, especially in critical care and critical environments. Equipment finance, we talked about that on the last slide a little bit, but a lot of times if you think about the capital structure and how the capital procurement goes, and it runs through this big process, and it's very difficult to get capital. Avoiding those very large bogeys. If this year is a tough year from a capital expense, but you need equipment and it's going to be tough, but the next few years might be better. Capital finance is a good way to do that. You can pay that down when you have the capital available. Remarketing, we talked about that. A good example of that I saw was a healthcare organization had bought a big coil for a very large air handler, brand new coil, and it was expensive. I think it was $50,000 to $100,000. They realized later that the way the coil came, they couldn't get it up their elevator. They couldn't get it in without cutting a hole in the side of their building. And so they did a workaround, but they had this thing sitting in a warehouse for a long time. Be a great piece of equipment to put on the market. Somebody wants that, and it's just an asset depreciating on their books today, and they can get rid of that. So think about those things when you're thinking about capital and what you have there. What I would say on remarketing, sometimes what people say is, "Oh, great, I can get rid of my old equipment or my old junk." And what I would say is, when you think about remarketing, think about things that you would buy, right? People aren't generally going to buy an old broken down car, but if the car is working fairly well in reasonable condition, then it would be for sale, and someone would buy that. So the market's going to dictate whether or not that's needed, and generally you'll know if it's not worth anything or if it's worth something. Okay. Um, a couple of things that we just touched on was the data solution. So this is a really important part of the off-balance sheet finance. This puts the finance into a variable payment, which is a critical part of an off-balance sheet treatment. But essentially what we have is electricity, water, and gas. The electric meter sits very small. It sits inside a panel. It's got a very large component to its connectivity. It's Cat-M technology that can go through walls very deeply and push that data out. This data that we gather on your behalf is your data, and it comes back to us for the reporting mechanism only. It doesn't sit on a customer's backbone. It comes via a cellular network, so we don't have the same IT problems that some other folks have. Um, we've monitored about 5 billion hours at this point, and we have a solution called Redaptive One that is a portal that you can go through and see the performance of all your assets. It's really good. We've seen some very simple solutions where there's been assets that have been, not on schedule, and you can look at that and simply do a scheduling internally to reduce energy costs. So some really good things there. Every minute this data is collected and broadcast to the cloud for us, and it's clean. We use AI to eliminate the noise and also to look into other opportunities for that data to be powerful for you. And it's secure. It's on our API, our Redaptive's API, and it can, push into Energy Star, like I mentioned. So really, really cool tool there. One of the biggest problems that we've seen in energy finance or capital equipment finance is proving out what you've done, and the Redaptive One platform is portal with minute updates that you can see. Just to leverage a little bit of our background and to explain that we've done this a few times. There's a couple of logos there that we've done. There's a few others that we've worked on. The data above the 167 projects. This is healthcare related, so 167 projects in 9 states in healthcare, over 200 million in finance. Average size is about 18.5 million. Don't let that make you nervous. Some of these are very small, some are large. That can be across a portfolio. Overall, we've done over 4,100 projects and well over $1 billion in finance across multiple industries. Part of what we're doing here, there's a lot of text on this, is to work with companies and identify where their goals are, like their GHGs, their energy reductions that they're looking for, and optimizing that portfolio for them. So we look into those with energy audits and then kind of prioritize with everybody's input to get that. We can do that, reduce costs on this from an energy standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint quite a bit. Okay. This can also help with keep your business operations stable when you're talking about resiliency, and it can also help with compliance. I'll go over a case study in a second, but it was a really important one for a hospital where they ended up leveraging Redaptive and Redaptive Finance to help solve that compliance problem that they had. Okay, so here's the first survey that's going to come up. Take a peek at this, and what we're going to do is we'd love you to prioritize these. This is what we see as common challenges in the healthcare industry. So it's patient comfort and environmental conditions, lack of funding for maintenance and capital expense, climbing costs of material and labor, equipment reliability, corporate sustainability goals. Sometimes those are made outside of facilities, and then compliance and accreditation. Afterwards, we're gonna ask you about what we've missed, but for the first one, if you wouldn't mind putting your priorities there, especially if you're a healthcare specific person, that would be best. I think it would be beneficial for everyone else too. Give you a second while that pops up. And then we're going to close that in just a second here. And think about those other issues that may come up. It might be something like vendor networks or reliable people in the industry that you can count on, or ever changing people in construction or vendors or equipment suppliers or lead time. Those can also be things that we see, but these are the main ones from a healthcare standpoint. Okay, Jessica, can we close that and show the results? Okay, so here are the results. So patient comfort, it looks like we've got out of 5, we've got lack of funding is a big one. Climbing costs, we've got 2 of 5. Equipment reliability, 3 of 5. Corporate sustainability goals, 1 is the key. So funding is a big one, clearly. And then second looks like patient comfort. And then third looks like reliability. These are based on the priority. So what we'll try to do is, let me touch this last one down here. Okay, and the compliance is not quite as critical for some of you folks. Okay, we'll close that, and then we're going to ask you another one, and this is going to be just type in, if you wouldn't mind, what those are. Anything else that comes up, and we'll see if there's anything good that we can help address when this comes up here. So we'll give you a second. While you're at it, start thinking about some tough questions for us. And Jessica, maybe you could type in the chat where I can fill in where I can see the questions in case any come up. I don't know exactly where to see that. Thank you. Okay, couple more seconds and then we're going to close this up. Okay, let's close this and we'll show the results. Oh, this looks like, Jessica, this is just showing me unless they're... Have to see.
So
Okay,
I will
Steve.
read them. I'm sorry, I will read them from the back end. Guarantee of cost neutral when utility rates change in a deregulated environment.
Okay, perfect.
That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah.
And then managing lack of resources due to environmental events. I'm not sure if this person was talking about specific equipment or even such things as IV fluids and all of that information that is, I know, very scarce right now given the extreme events, the hurricanes of recent.
Yeah, yeah. Let me address the one about the cost neutrality. When you do an energy as a service contract, what we essentially do is you are buying a block of energy, sort of like a PPA. And in a PPA, you're paying for a production, a certain block of energy at a specific rate. That rate is fixed. What we do is we basically back into the cost on that utility rate from the cost of the project and the work that we've performed. So in those markets, including deregulated or regulated, as those energy costs go up, our cost is fixed. So if we've saved you 30% of your energy cost and we're billing you for 25 and you're keeping 5, for example, that 25% is fixed. You'll still be paying the other, let's say 70% at the deregulated or regular market to your utility bill. But the portion that you'd pay to Adaptive is at a fixed rate. That's great for you because it's a good hedge against inflationary costs and cost escalation of the energy market. I also advise people to put escalators in there. You can get, a lot of times we'll do studies and look at the way that the market is moving. If it's going up, average of 5% per year, we might escalate at 3% in the contract, which gives you the opportunity to get more bang for your buck from a equipment finance standpoint and still keeps you under the rate. That decision is the customer's always, so they can fix it at a fixed rate without an escalator, or they can add an escalator that they're comfortable with in there. But appreciate the question. On the lack of resources on environmental, I think that's going to, for me, that sort of fits into general lack of resources and funding. What we've seen in the healthcare market is generally as a cost center, the facilities and maintenance have been reduced and reduced and reduced over time, and they're looking for a shot in the arm from a finance standpoint. This can, if you put the capital finance into an energy as a service contract, it can potentially free up some of that other capital within the healthcare organization to do things that are critical, like patient care, like maintenance people, and not have that pressure around there. So hopefully I answered those a little bit. If not, I'll try to catch those a little bit later. But thank you for those questions, and we'll hit some of those. Lack of funding is certainly, I'm happy to see that was the top result because that's what we do. And patient comfort is really important. So we'll try to hit some of those in some of these case studies. Okay. So this is the first one. This is most of these are confidential clients because they're specific, and some of them have a little bit of stuff on it that's not very good publicly. But this is a client of ours that had a really big problem. This is out of Los Angeles. They've seen humidity go up over the last 20 years, and their ORs and their OR cooling and humidity was designed about 35 or 40 years ago. And because of that, they've run into some problems with humidity. So those ORs are now going out of spec, and their facility is a facility for when they have overruns on other critical care places, they'll come to their facility. So these folks are having to notify the Joint Commission that their ORs are out of spec and need to be taken off the list until they improve that. So it's a pretty big black eye for them, or has been. And so that's a really big problem. So what we did in this case was the solution here was that their chillers were not sized properly for this. They needed to upsize those with some redundancy. So we added 2 chillers that were upsized from this. That allowed us to get a colder water to reduce that humidity. So that was kind of the solution there. There's a new air handler that's super efficient on this. This was not a energy as a service with a cost neutrality project. This was an emergency repair because they had problems. They had, these operating rooms that they have are big revenue generators, and they were closed. So it was a really big revenue opportunity loss. The maintenance was highly problematic. Whenever they'd have these, they'd have to go work on these, and then the regulatory issues were problematic. So this has still got a little bit going on it, but it was about $1.6 million, so a very small project here to do this work. So the projected revenue loss due to the humidity, which was their biggest problem, is zero going forward. We expect that this is going to work. The design's been done great. One of the things that we like to promote is that we have a stable of contractors and engineers that we work with. We're very agnostic to technologies and people. So if you have folks at your site that you choose to use with, or that are familiar with your site, we can work with them and contract with them, no problem. We'll oftentimes do the scoping and energy survey and then give that scope to those folks to do that work. But it was great for them because they got to use some really high-end, strong engineering folks that they needed in this site because it was complicated. They got a 20% increase in capacity. And in this case, because their old equipment was so inefficient that they didn't increase consumption from an electricity standpoint. So it's really cool for them because they kept their costs, their maintenance costs dropped drastically, their energy costs stayed stable, and they got this new equipment and got to avoid a $1.6 million unbudgeted capital avoidance. So pretty important for them. Okay, so this is a question that comes up in this energy as a service and sustainability market constantly, and I think it's important to explain. There's kind of like 3 big chunks that we see, and there's a very different lens on these when we see these. So infrastructure resilience on the left side This is really talking about, I've got aged equipment that's falling apart, and this is really important for us to get this repaired, to keep the wheels on the facility. So we generally see this in large infrastructure, right? Central plants, distributed systems, HVAC equipment, cogen fuel cells, anything like that's resilient to the facility, especially keeping that facility going. Um, in the center is OpEx savings. When we're talking about cost neutrality, what we're talking about is over the term of the project, the savings will pay for the entirety of the cost and maybe more, right? These generally are the measures that you'll see there in OpEx savings: LED lighting, HVAC scheduling, and set points, really simple complication controls modifications, VFDs, HVAC optimization. So this usually includes like an EC motor and some cryogen fuel refrigerant additives to separate oil and refrigerant, retrocommissioning solar, and the refurbishment, is part of it. Sometimes there's pans, there's coils, things that need to be done, and then simple controls. That's if somebody is really just looking for cost savings. They want to do some upgrades, but they can't spend a penny, period. On the right side is what we see when we see GHG reduction. Most all of these measures on the left will do some sort of GHG. Solar and things like this are amazing because they take that power off the grid, and eliminate the grid. When you're looking at GHG, it's important to look at the cleanliness of the grid and where that power is coming from. If you have a clean grid, then it's things like solar may not reduce as much as you think. If you have a dirty grid, they're amazing to do things like that. One of the questions that we see often here is when we ask people what they want, they say our goals are GHG reduction. And the first thing I might ask them is, tell me about your boilers. Are they gas fired? Because if they are, I want to get rid of them, right? And we would like to put in electric boilers, but your electric cost is going to go up and your gas cost will go down drastically. They realize that the cost impact to that is not really going to work. So that the optimization of GHG reduction and OpEx savings is typically where we see most of the customers that are looking at GHG reduction. They want to maximize their GHG without increasing costs at all to the facility. So they want cost neutrality or better GHG reduction. So it's kind of a mix of these two measures. We'll talk about blending these things together, which is really powerful, in a couple of slides. But essentially, if you have a HVAC system that you want to add, and the savings won't pay for it, you can use things like LED or solar that are cost accretive to help pay for that, and blend these economics together so you get what you want without cost out of pocket. It's really a key thing for people to use. This is another facility that we're working on. We've done this project. It's the term is not complete. It's within the term currently. This is a single site, 400,000 square foot. You get about 15 assets in this. What they had is a bunch of 410A RTUs. So there was 8 of them, and then there was 7 AHUs that needed a replacement. In this case, this was a really cool one because we got to use the 410A optimization, get incredible cost savings, and then replace the AHUs, which are typically not cost accretive, mix those metrics together, and make this thing cash flow positive for them. And so this was 0 out of pocket. We did some repair on the compressed system and some pumping that was going there. They had constant volume, and we turned that into variable volume. So this increases their resilience. They've got a bunch of new equipment and a bunch of upgraded equipment. It reduced the maintenance costs by about $20,000 a year, and it has a significant set of GHGs in reduction. So about 6,000 homes worth of electricity is the reduction, 29,000 barrels of equivalent barrels of oil, 15,000 metric tons of CO2 avoided. This was over the term of 15 years, not a ton of money, but they save $190,000. So they're saving about, I don't know, it's probably $11,000 per year over this term, and they're getting brand new equipment and upgraded equipment. So a really cool example of energy as a service with cost neutrality, getting resiliency up and upgrading equipment. Okay, so scaling and accelerating this type of work is super important. And when we talk about this, what we talk about is blending of economics. We talked about it on a single site with the R10A or R410A and the R22 old air handlers, and mixing those metrics. Now think about it as a global scale, and now let's start blending sites across the board. So from a LED standpoint, let's talk about doing 100 sites or 1,000 sites in a year. Most companies, when they put together their capital budget, are looking at 25 sites a year or something like that to upgrade. We want to do 1,000 sites a year, and we've proven it. So that's something that what you can do is blend sites. You may have a site in Mississippi that has a low utility rate and can't pay for the energy retrofit because it's not cost accretive, but a site in California with amazingly high energy costs can help that site. So if we look at not individual P&Ls, we can look at this across the board, right? So it gets rid of all of your CapEx constraints, your site level P&Ls, internal processes. When you go through that capital, I worked in big pharma, we'd have to put up our budget, get it chopped down, things like that. In an energy as a service, if you've got an approved at a high level, you can avoid that. You still go through your internal process, but generally the capital process is reduced. And then the resources. So, Redaptive provides energy engineering, the audits, the project management. We do the maintenance typically on that equipment during the term. So those are good things to consider there. When you're looking at what the benefits of that are in general, you're looking at OpEx savings that are dropping. So this is energy and maintenance costs are dropping by quite a bit. We most of the time move the CapEx budget over to the OpEx budget, and then we reduce that so that it's neutral. The blending of these sites is a really good way to do it. The most forward-thinking companies that we see want to save GHG or energy costs across the board, and they look past the individual site P&Ls, and they can reallocate internally or keep those things separate, but do this as a corporate initiative. So those are really the things. And on the maintenance cost, the best way to think about this is if you have a piece of equipment, as it ages, the maintenance costs go up. If you put in a brand new piece of equipment, you're going to be under most likely a full service warranty for at least the first year. And then that maintenance is going to start to creep up over the life of that till you get to end of life, which is probably where you are today, plus inflation is where your costs will be. So your costs are going to drop drastically on year one, likely down to zero, and then they're going to start creeping up probably 5 to 10% per year, depending on the EUL there. So an important thing to think about with maintenance and important to put into the calculations for energy as a service. This is an example of a series of sites. So this is a LED. There's two that we'll do that are LED. When we're talking about economics and how this stuff, the nuts and bolts of this. In this case, the energy savings is $1,120,000. Maintenance savings is 80, so the total savings is 1.2 million annually. The payment to Redaptive in this case is $1 million, and the impact to OpEx is a positive $200,000 for the customer during the term. And in this term, where you can see that this is escalating, so we've used a 3% utility escalator in this over this 7-year term. This project is going to benefit them $2.5 million over the expected life of that lighting. And in this case, we had a 10-year EUL. They're going to save about $7 million on a fairly inexpensive upgrade. So really important to think about that and think about the life after the term. Oftentimes these these years will dwarf the interim savings. So important to put into those calculations, or to at least talk about that with the company. Okay, when we look at, and hopefully you folks like economics and graphics a little bit, but when we look at something like this, the main takeaway that we want to show here in doing a program like this is really about like NPV and the advantage of energy as a service. If you look at the graphic here, what we're saying is we're going to do this installation, and that installation is going to be $0 out of pocket. You're going to have cost savings every single year. So essentially what's going to happen is you're going to be positive. If line 0 is here, you're going to be positive with Redaptive immediately, right? If you spend your own capital, what's going to happen is you're going to immediately have, in this case, a $4 million out of pocket or $3.5 million out of pocket expense that you're going to have to spend over the first year. And then you're going to get those savings, and those savings are going to drop that cost down, and you're going to end up catching up at some point at EUL, most likely, but it's going to take you, in this case, about 8 years to get there. With Redaptive, it's going to be generally much faster because we don't have the people constraints, and we have, thousands of network vendors that we work with. And so that's really one of the key things is your conventional CapEx is going to be slower. You're going to have a large out-of-pocket cost, and then you're going to catch up over time, where with an energy savings program, you're going to be cost accretive immediately. So some of these things that we put in here that we talk about, the benefit is immediate cash flow to the business, long-term energy and maintenance costs reduction, which is massive, no capital outlay. In this case with LED, when you think about a fluorescent to LED, generally if you're talking about a regular tube, you're talking about a 32 watt, that's probably taken 29 or 30 watts. We're replacing that with an 11-watt tube, even less sometimes now. So you've got a massive reduction in there, somewhere around 40 to 70%. 60 is pretty common. Your lighting is improved drastically. The CRI, which is the color rendering index, is greatly improved over fluorescent. So you see much better. You'll see colors. If you have things that are important, surgeons, for example, really like a 5000K. They can see the blood in their surgery very well. It stands out for them, and they really enjoy that. And it's a very easy and simple efficiency upgrade to make. The math is very easy to do here. And then there's usually a decent amount of offsets for incentives. So with Redaptive, we have an incentive team. The project cost us $1 million and 200,000 in incentives. We actually underwrite that project at 800 grand. If we don't cash that rebate, then it's on us. So that's kind of the benefits of doing an energy as a service program. When you look at CapEx, and when you look at cost accretive measures and how the NPV works, these things can be put together for you in graphics very easily to help prove those out. Okay, this is another another case study. So this is a healthcare client that we've worked with across the country. This is 6 states, 24 locations. And this has quite a few things in it. It has a series of LED projects across the country. Those are all cash flow positive. Those have done very well for them. And then it has a central plant. And it has some other major pieces of equipment that are part of that project. So they generally saw a central plant chiller system. They wanted to offset that with some costs. They had compliance problems, failures, maintenance costs were drastically increasing. And so we looked at that capital plan and created an overall plan for them, which included upgrading an entire central plant, doing some other things. We've done elevators for these folks, new cooling towers, and their structure for the cooling towers, DDC controls. We put in a entire, in this case, it was a Johnson control system, big chillers, large boilers for this. And then we did 63,000 light fixtures to help them pay for this across 24 locations. So this was non-CapEx. So they had that offset. There was the central plant was about $20 million of original investment that we put in. We spread that term over 8 years. And then the lighting had the ability to help pay that down. So over the 10 years, their term, it's a $30 million CapEx avoidance that they would have had to do, 20 million in gross savings. So essentially they're paying $10 million for $30 million worth of new equipment and resiliency. And you can see the metrics here on metric tons of CO2 and equivalent barrels of oil that are included here. So pretty awesome project that we did for these folks. Had some real financial struggles, and we were able to get in there with them and partner with them and help them. Okay, so that's close to the end here, but wanted to just touch on it. When we do this work, we work very collaboratively with the facilities team. We don't, we're Adaptive doesn't do something where we come in and tell you how to operate a hospital. Y'all are the experts. Temporary services and collaboration with the facility team is always part of the experience and what we strive for. We're looking for enhanced aesthetics, comfort, lighting, patient experience, as well as as one of those. I think that was second on that survey outside of funding. And just if you're thinking about this, I would encourage you to look at finance companies. We're Adaptive specifically, of course, and energy as a service to generate that off balance sheet treatment and get these balanced economics. Okay, so that's the end of that presentation. Jessica, I think you have questions that may pop up in the survey, and I'm happy to answer any of those.
Yes, we do have a few questions that have come in, some more specific than others. So thank you in advance to those who have submitted questions for Ian this afternoon. And Ian, thank you as well for all of the information you provided today. So let's kick this off. Ian, what are the top 3 questions that you get when working with a new facility?
So I think when I'm dealing with the facilities department, what I usually get is a series of questions that are centered around us taking over their operations, right? And so they want to know how we're going to do it, what kind of contracting methodology, who the vendors are, things like that. We are, like I mentioned, agnostic to that. We use local vendors. We don't take over. Essentially, what we do is the legwork for the customer, and the customer makes the decision. Generally, the final with suggestions, the final decision on who the contractors are. So those are important. We hear another question that we hear about is the cost of capital, and that comes up quite a bit. It's a good question, and it's not a great question. So generally what happens in an energy as a service at Adaptive is we look at the customer's weighted average cost of capital, and we generally are right there. Oftentimes we beat it. So whether people know or not, they're paying interest on that through their accounting department anyway. So those costs are generally negated. If you're thinking about just the cost of capital, then I think what's happening is we're missing the bigger picture. That bigger picture being resources, data, sustainability, and energy cost driving down and acceleration. So I would, I'm not trying to say those things don't matter, but generally those things, the cost of capital is generally not a conversation because we usually beat it. And sometimes we're not right there, but we're very close. But those other things are really important to be brought up. The other one that I see is around that kind of GHG question. We see that from sustainability folks a lot. They want GHGs to drop massively, but don't have any budget. They want to know how to do it. And that's that kind of blending of OpEx neutrality or accretive to help with other measures to maximize that GHG. So hopefully those are reasonable questions or answers to that question. But I'd say those are pretty common for us.
That does not surprise me whatsoever. And this question kind of goes a little bit along with the last part of your answer there. So how customizable are energy as a service solutions to fit the specific needs of different healthcare facilities or other facilities just in general?
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a place where we differentiate from other folks quite a bit, since we're agnostic to technologies and suppliers or contractors. Um, what we really want to do is put in the best products that are available for the site. And so there might be a specific type of AC unit. We generally use the main, the big companies that you're familiar with, because we own that asset during the term. So we need to make sure it's a high quality asset, but we're not beholden to our equipment outside of our metering, just to prove it out, because it goes into our cloud. So generally what happens is you have a lot of flexibility in the vendor selection and the way that we do that. In the term, it's very flexible, and that's a good one too. Some people say, I want the shortest time at neutrality, so it might be a 5-year term. Some people say, hey, it's a 15-year contract. I want you to be on the hook to maintain that, and I want to pocket 25% of the savings for 15 years. So a lot of people extend their contracts. They know they're going to be in the building for a while, and they turn it essentially into a profit center, this project. Um, the other one is around maintenance, that we see a lot of flexibility around. And so when we have that equipment ownership as part of this financial strike that we do, and the treatment of the accounting treatment that we have, there's ownership there, and we have some obligation for risk transfer. That typically will be anywhere from a parts only replacement. So let's say for LED lighting, a light goes out, we'll replace that light. You guys put the customer would put the light in, but we'd provide the light through a portal, all the way to full service, own and operate a central plant. So we can buy that central plant, we can own and operate and upgrade that and sell the utilities out. That flexibility in there can go from, it can be preventative maintenance, preventative and reactive, emergency services, to own and operate. So around the maintenance, it can be very flexible. We also have the ability, if people work with an FM or they have a maintenance provider, we can strike the maintenance completely from the contract, so long as we have the right to look at that to make sure that that equipment, which is, technically ours during the term, is maintained properly. So that's a really flexible part of that contract. But I think that's one of the neat things that we have around that is flexibility on contract length, finance, how we finance this with the different types of finance we talked about, and how that ongoing maintenance, reactive, from parts only all the way through full service is offered, and it's the customer's choice with us.
So, speaking about, how flexible the financing or the setup of someone's contract and terms are, is there a specific length of time that you see healthcare facilities, engaging in a contract for? Or are you seeing the more like 15-year contracts or ones that are a like shorter time period?
A lot of people talk about really, really short contracts, and what I would say is that the inflationary cost of equipment has gone up higher than the energy inflationary costs. And so in my view, here in some parts of Western Europe, it's the opposite. But here, what we've seen is the term lengths have actually extended to neutrality. So oftentimes we'll see lighting from a 7 to 10 year contract. It can be quicker if the lights are on more and if there's a high cost there. But I would say a lot of times it's about a 7 to 10 year contract these days. That's a high quality product. On equipment, we'll see HVAC equipment will typically see up to about 15 years. A lot of times we'll see 12, 10 sometimes. We do some RTU replacement for some retail stores where we're doing hundreds of sites simultaneously, and those operate at a 5-year term. They have a very large maintenance offset that they're doing in that. So that's a little bit abnormal. Generally, when you're looking at equipment finance, you don't go past about 75% of the expected useful life of that. So there's a ASHRAE EUL, and then you back off of that. The reason is if we were to extend that contract to a year after end of life, we would have to generally put a replacement of that piece of equipment into that. So the customer would have to pay twice. So you want to balance that with EUL, and then look at your own goals, whether it's putting cash in the pocket or getting the shortest term. Solar, you see 20-25 year, those panels will go out much further now. And then some heavy equipment, chillers and boilers will have an EUL of 20 or 25 years. So those terms can be 15 to 20 years fairly often. And you really want to look at own versus lease facilities when you're looking out at those longer terms to make sure that that facility is going to be there. But really depends on the customer's goals and what they want. If they want to shorten that as much as possible, or if they want to extend that and put some money in their pocket.
Okay. Well, I think we have time for probably one more question or so. So, say I'm meeting with you, Ian, and we want to get started using Redaptive services and for a variety of different uh, parts of our facility. What is my timeline looking at like from the time we first meet until everything is set up in place and I'm receiving data and information?
Okay, tricky. And I would say tricky only because of contracting, right? So sometimes our contract is very simple. It's 16 pages, 8 are templates. It's an MSA with a 2-page work order. These contracts are different for most corporate attorneys because they're used to AIA type of contracts. That sometimes takes time. If we get rid of contracting and say we do NDAs and we get contracts in place within a timeline, what we would typically do is sign some sort of agreement that says we're committed to each other, like a binding letter of agreement. We would schedule an audit. That audit, from audit to final pricing, is usually 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the measure. Call it 8 to be a little bit safe. So a couple of weeks to get out there, about 2 months to get the audit done and the pricing back, especially if it's some tougher mechanical measures. We write that, do the financial modeling and present it within about a week, and then we can kick that off fairly soon after. I would say that would be an anomaly because of the contracting, and contracting usually is the thing that takes the longest amount of time. The installations vary. LED, like if it's VFDs, a lot of those can be off the shelf. A lot of times we want to get baselines of, depending on the time, sometimes as long as 9 months, depending on the data requirement that the customer has. Sometimes it's as short as a couple of weeks if it's something like LED or non environmental related. So those installations for LEDs, let's say you've got a 30-day lead time, and if it's a couple 100,000 square foot site, maybe it takes 60 days. If it's a boiler, you probably have a lead time of about 9 months to 12 months while we're collecting data anyway, and then that installation's over a couple of months. And that's a similar time frame to solar. It's usually around 11 to 14 months total for that installation from material order, including the interconnect and all that. So really varies on that, but a lot of that's lead time, and then on the contracting side, a lot of it's around the contract.
No, that makes sense. I know that's not the easiest question to answer based on a variety of factors going on. Well, Ian, I do want to thank you for your time today. And if you are watching this event on demand, please feel free to continue submitting questions. We will pass any questions that do come in over to the team at Redaptive, and we look forward to working with you guys more in 2025. So thank you to everyone from joining all over the world today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all.